such good music. I kind of hate to shut it down, but I got to. If you guys are going to hear what I have to say, you guys got to not have that annoying background music going on, right? And that is something I know a lot of people do on their channels is they put like music in the background the whole time, and it gets really annoying when they try to talk over it and stuff. So trying to respect you guys enough to not do that. Hopefully that's coming through. So thank you everybody for joining me today. I've got a pretty good topic for you guys today. This is on the antitrust lawsuit that the U.S. government has submitted to the federal court system. Just an FYI, in case anybody who's watching this, I know a lot of you guys are from other countries. You're not very familiar with U.S. law. I am not a lawyer, nor do I proclaim to be, nor do I plan on giving any sort of law advice or legal advice to anybody here. But I think it's important because, you know, this is the technology sector and these kind of things do impact us as software developers and anybody who's in the IT industry. So I thought I would kind of talk about it a little bit today. Hey, Survivalizer! Good to see you, buddy. As Jacko would say, good. Yeah. I kind of want to talk about that. So whether or not this is a good thing, let's kind of explore that a little bit today. So let me do my little video intro and then we'll get started. Well, that was a little loud. I'm going to have to fix the audio on that. Sorry, guys. I think that was a little bit loud. It's hard to tell. It doesn't actually play in my speakers when I do that, so I have to just kind of look at the little audio output bar, and it looks like it was kind of a little loud. So I apologize for that. I will try to fix that in the future. But the good news is I did make an upgrade to my standard process today. I remembered to unmute myself before talking for 40 minutes. So yay for me. That's awesome. By the way, Survivalizer, I hope the job stuff is working out for you. I know we talked back and forth a little bit about it. I hope that the job scenario situation is working out for you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this Google and U.S. government fight. So let me switch on over. Oh, that's not the right one. Switch over to this bad boy here. That's right, my monitor over on the other side, so you guys can see what it is that I'm talking about. So first of all, I do want to kind of point out it was loud. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll try to fix that. I'll try to make sure I get that right. It's a long story. We'll talk later. Okay. All right. So, News Voice is I've been doing this for a while. I've actually mentioned News Voice before. I think it's an app that you typically get on your phone. Their website isn't quite as good. I wish that they would make some improvements. Like the phone app is really, really great. This is their website version, which is okay. The main problem that I have is that with News Voice on the website, they only give you the top 3 articles related to something. But like, just let me show you. I've actually got my phone hooked up here through Dex. Because I have a Samsung, and you can, stream. You can take your phone and actually put it on your computer. It's kind of cool without doing the whole mirroring thing. This is the actual, this is an application that you can work with your phone through your computer. It's pretty cool. But you'll see, there's a ton more articles related to this that's on the News Voice app, and this is kind of a bummer about Dex. I am scrolling the mouse wheel so hard right now, and it's just barely going. But anyway, you can see there are a lot of articles on this today. And if you go over to News Voice, you'll definitely be able to check them out. But I'm going to pull up just these. No, go away. Go away. Yes. Exit Dex. I don't need that anymore. But yeah, there's these. This News Voice is great because, number one, it kind of gives you this collection of all the articles related to a topic on your phone, easy to manage. And then there's a comment section to each kind of condensed collection. So you have just kind of this one headline with a blurb about the subject, and then all of the news articles. And they tell you if they're on the left or the right or they're center or they're from Asia or from Europe or from India. So you know the source and you know maybe the political slant that there is to the agency that's producing that article, etc. So News Voice is definitely my go-to right now in terms of trying to find out what news to read about. And then you have all these comments that are on here and upvotes, right? So you can upvote a set of stories you think they're important, so they appear towards the top of the page. So really good stuff. I really highly recommend getting News Voice. I do wish that their web app was a little bit better, but we'll move on from that. Let's talk about antitrust and Google and the United States government. First of all, so some of you may know, some of you may not know, I'm a little bit more libertarian leaning with things. I have a very high opinion of Milton Friedman in terms of how you deal with economic situations and, how you grow economies and such. And one of the things that is paramount there is as little government intrusion as possible. There has to be some regulation, but the regulation is around things like antitrust, around making sure that there is a open market, right? There's a marketplace that is open for all. So you as the consumer can decide and make your own choices. And if a business is going in and doing certain practices that stop other businesses or challengers from growing in kind of illegal ways, and I hate to say illegal because this is where things get a little sketchy and hard to define. What do you consider a practice that is antitrust? Like, what is that? And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit today too, because I want to pull up a great little definition and discussion about antitrust that comes from Investopedia. But yeah, so let's just kind of dig in real quick and do a quick little look over some of this. Let's go through the European version of this. You need to listen to No Treason, A Constitution of No Authority by Lysander Spooner, if you haven't already. I have not, Survivalizer. Okay, I need to listen to No Treason, A Constitution of No Authority. All right, I'll have to look that up later. I'm going to get the European perspective on this. No, one thing before I jump into the European version of this, the EU has sued Google several times since 2010 for antitrust laws, for violating antitrust laws in the EU. So, Google's been dinged several times by the EU for this. Okay, so The Guardian says the U.S. Justice Department sues Google over accusations of illegal monopoly. Lawsuit accuses tech company of abusing its position to dominate search and search advertising. By the way, you do not need to be a monopoly to be against antitrust, from my understanding. You just need to have a significant market share, and you need to be doing practices that prohibit that are anti-competitive, right? But again, we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get into the Investopedia stuff. The U.S. Justice Department filed a lawsuit against Google on Tuesday, accusing the tech company of abusing its power to maintain an illegal monopoly over search and search advertising. 2 decades ago, Google became the darling of Silicon Valley as a scrappy startup with an innovative way to search the emergent internet that Google is long gone, the suit alleged. Ooh. There's a link here. This actually goes to the Justice Department filing. So if you want to look through, the actual... this is the release. This is the statement that they are releasing. This is not the actual... filing or anything like that. This is just a public statement. And Google has their own public statement in response to this. But it's definitely well worth reading if you want to kind of dig into the more nitty gritty of why they're being sued and why they think that they have a monopoly. Today, Google is a monopoly gatekeeper for the internet that has used pernicious anti-competitive tactics to maintain and extend its monopolies. Now, that is the very, very important piece of this. It's not antitrust if you are just the biggest person in the room, right? Or you're the biggest corporation in an industry. That does not make you an antitrust. you have to be doing these anti-competitive tactics. You have to be doing something to eliminate competition in the marketplace. Now, where you draw that line, like what exactly constitutes an anti-competitive, is very difficult to say, because if you just continuously lower your prices on things, is that anti-competitive? You could possibly regard it as that, right? If you were the major retailer and you just constantly lowered your prices over and over again to price out the competition, that's anti-competitive, right? In some ways, it's anti-competitive because you're trying to make sure that you get more money than what the competition does. That's just the nature of the game. So what actually constitutes a true, like, this is illegal? You've gone beyond some sort of moral ethic in terms of how you're competing. Where is that line drawn? And I guess a good example of that would be like the browser wars from the bygone area of the 90s and between Netscape and Microsoft, right? Microsoft was releasing an operating system, and then if you tried to install Netscape, they had several that you essentially couldn't install Netscape for a long time. You could not install Netscape without going through some really stressful, I shouldn't say stressful, for some really ridiculous hoops that you had to go through just to get Netscape installed. And sometimes it didn't even work. So clearly Microsoft was forcing you to, or not allowing you to install Netscape, or making it really difficult. And then you couldn't, there was actually a point when, I think it was Windows 95 when it was released. It was either 95 or 97, I can't remember. But when you had Internet Explorer already pre-installed with the operating system, and you couldn't get rid of it, right? You could not uninstall Internet Explorer. That was antitrust. Like, there's a moral, ethical boundary being crossed there when you essentially eliminate any possibility of your competitor even really existing within an operating system, and you're also making it impossible to remove your own program. That's probably stepping the line. How do you define that line? How do you legally define what that line is? That's kind of hard to do, because it's basically a moral or an ethical standard that you're trying to apply in law. And that's, I think, overall, that's what law is typically trying to do, is to establish some sort of moral or ethical, boundary by which you cannot cross. But what is antitrust? What is an competitive practice? It's different, I think, for different people, which is why this is so difficult to nail down, and why I think the U.S. government isn't typically in the business of doing antitrust. Like, I think in fact, the last time that the U.S. government filed an antitrust, I think, was the Microsoft one against tech. I should say. I don't know. I'm probably wrong on that. I imagine they've had to have, but I haven't heard of any major stories about an antitrust filing against any other companies since Microsoft. Now, one of the other things I kind of want to point out is, if they're going after Google because of the dominant market share, right? If it's just they're 80%, right? They have 80% of the market share. Most of the internet traffic goes through them. What does that imply about companies like Amazon? Right? If you're getting all of your goods through Amazon, and more people are doing that. Facebook almost got antitrusted. I thought I heard something about that, and they're still kind of they're still regularly going to Senate hearings and stuff. Anyway, going back to Amazon. So, like, Amazon is kind of the place you go, and I go there. It's convenient. I can buy stuff. The thing that's a little bit different about Amazon, though, is that they are really just a marketplace for other businesses to sell their product. So that's a little bit of a different model that might help continuously keep them keep antitrust at bay. But there's no doubt that we're buying stuff through Amazon, right? We're going to Amazon to buy our things, and some of us, I haven't stepped in a Walmart in probably a good year and a half, but Walmart is still a thing out there, and Walmart, from what I understand, they're actually building up a pretty good e-commerce presence now. I don't know that they will be competitive with Amazon in any time soon, but it is interesting to think about the implications of what would an antitrust against Google provide against some of these other larger businesses like Facebook, like Amazon. Okay. Yeah, Amazon has AWS and runs most of the net. That's true. Although Azure is pretty big too. I think the market share is not nearly as big for AWS as as Amazon has in terms of like just regular marketplace buying goods and stuff online. I think that's the more the area where they have a larger space. But again, this comes back to, are you doing things that are anti-competitive? Is it one thing to just be having a better product versus are you providing a better product, but you're also making sure nobody else can compete with you by doing some tricky things? The antitrust suit is the most significant legal challenge to a major tech company in decades and comes as U.S. authorities are increasingly critical of the business practices of the major tech companies. The long-awaited case filed in Washington, D.C. alleges that Google unfairly acts as a gatekeeper to the web through a series of business agreements that effectively lock out competition. That's the key piece here, right? Business agreements that effectively lock out competition. Justice officials have also challenged an arrangement in which Google's search application is preloaded and cannot be deleted on mobile phones running its Android operating system. That sounds an awful lot like Internet Explorer. You have to use our search if you're going to use our phone. You're going to have to use our browser if you're going to use our operating system. Sounds an awful lot like that. The company pays billions each year to secure default status for its general search engine, and in many cases to specifically prohibit Google's counterparties from dealing with Google's competitors, the suit says, in a move that has foreclosed competition for internet search. So again, this is the key stuff. This is the key part of the legal entanglement that they are finding themselves in, is that they are, in many cases, specifically prohibit Google's counterparties from dealing with Google's competitors. I don't know what counterparties really means in this case, but like it almost sounds like I think when you say counterparties, I think you mean partners in a way, people that are partnering with or using Google, and then Google says you can't use our competitors. So maybe if I had my website that I was doing, I don't know, having my search engine, the Google search engine was indexing my page, and I had to have some sort of special tag on there to do Google Analytics, or I was doing advertising through Google, and then I wanted to go to Yahoo and do it. Yeah, counterparties is a legal term. I think you're right. I just don't know what that means. That's a really good question. I should probably look that up. Because that almost sounds weird. Counterparties cannot talk to competitors. It almost sounds like counterparties would be... Yeah, I think it just means anybody that's doing business with Google. I think that's really all that it means, but I'd have to look it up. Google's alleged anti-competitive practices are especially pernicious because they deny rivals scale to compete effectively and thwart potential innovation, the suit alleged. In a statement, Google called the suit deeply flawed. People use Google because they chose to, not because they're forced to or because they can't find alternatives, the company said. So, this is the defense. And this is the pretty typical defense you're going to find against any sort of anti-competition, antitrust. Are my links not going through? Yeah, I don't have any links. Survivalism. I think it just automatically shuts those down unless I turn it on. But yeah, people. So what they're saying here is true, right? I use DuckDuckGo. I've used SmartPage, which is really just so SmartPage. Or, I'm sorry, I said SmartPage. It's StartPage. Excuse me, StartPage. I've used StartPage several times. The interesting thing about StartPage is it's actually Google. It is actually Google. But what they do is they don't do data, personal data sharing. But it is Google. Like, this was set up, I forget exactly why, but it was something to do with, again, an antitrust lawsuit that was filed against Google. And so this page was set up. Yeah, I can't find it here, but Yeah, it was essentially started because of the antitrust suits that were filed against Google, and so they came up as an alternative and as a competitor that actually sits with Google as the backbone. Like if I do an actual search for, I don't know, let's go with .NET Core. Why not? So behind the scenes here, this is actually Google. It's just that the API has been released for Start Page to use and then present for themselves. So, if you want the results of Google, but you don't want your privacy to be infringed upon like Google does, or have the advertising issues that you typically can get with Google, you can go here. You can go to Start Page and get all the goodness. So that was born about, though, because of antitrust. You see, so it's like we have a competitor that uses our own technology, but it wouldn't have existed if it weren't for these dang antitrust laws. If it weren't for those meddling kids, I would have gotten away with it. Okay. In a statement, Google called the suit deeply flawed. People use Google because they chose to, not because they are forced to or because they can't find alternatives. And that's not entirely wrong. Right? Google gained popularity. Now, what they're doing now, and see, here's the thing. Once you reach a certain size where you become like Google is now a verb, right? Go Google it, right? It's a verb. Once you've established yourself as a verb, essentially, then you are so ingrained in the popular opinion that it's almost impossible to get you out, right? There's no way to create competition. Nobody says go Yahoo it, right? Nobody says go dogpile it. Nobody's saying those things. They say go Google it. It's even hard to say go Bing it. There's no real. There are competitors. There's Bing. There's Yahoo. There's Dogpile. There's, I think Hotbot is still around. Alta Vista. I don't know if they're still around, but like there've been web searches, web crawlers, and such for a very, very long time. Since one of the first things that was invented was a web search, right? It's like one of the first things that you were able to do. And yet Google came up on top not because they were being anti-competitive, they were just good at what they were doing, right? They were creating search results that were more or less tailored to what you were looking for. But the problem but there was a kind of a problem with it in that they were using your own personal information to kind of figure that out, right? We keep track of you and what your viewing habits are and where you're going. And also things like, for a long time, they were using links to other pages. So, if I had a website, but then I had 50 blog posts that were all linking to to my page, then that would help increase my rating within Google. That wasn't necessarily such a bad thing. It was just, it wasn't a bad thing that Google did. It was something that people could do, and they figured out how to kind of tinker with the algorithm. But yeah, they basically figured out ways of making Google a much more popular place to go based upon the results that you got. And I think still to this day, sometimes I have to go to Google because they just have a better set of results. I prefer DuckDuckGo whenever I can, but I fully admit that sometimes I have a hard time finding what I'm looking for. If I go Google it, I actually get the results a little bit quicker. And that's something to keep in mind here, is that they do have, I think we all have to agree, they do have a superior product. What they provide to the user is actually better if you ignore the privacy concerns and you ignore, some of the mischievous practices, we could say, about what they do. The fact is they provide really good, excellent results. They've been the best at doing this, which is why we all go there. It's the same thing with Amazon, right? Like the experience of how to go buy things on Amazon, there's no competitor. There's really nobody that really makes it as good. Or as cheap, really. So how can you say that those practices of just being the best is antitrust? You can't. You actually have to find some way that they are doing something that really is underhanded and not just providing a better product. Survival Advisor, you've been saying a lot of things here. Let me see. I switched to Pronto Mail Pro for email, and it's fantastic. After Spectre and Meltdown, there is no privacy ever. Yeah, Google's old motto of "Don't be evil" went the way of the dodo bird a while ago. I agree with that. I wish they would go back to that. PagerRank is still a good algorithm. It just needs an update to be Byzantine fault tolerant. Yeah. So, yeah, PagerRank is pretty good. So there are alternatives. Like there are a lot of alternatives. The problem is that people don't use them. How long has Linux been around? Yet we still, the majority of people use Windows, right? You either buy a Mac, which, think about that. Buying a Mac, there is no operating system you can put on a Mac other than the Mac OS. Well, you can. There are ways of getting around it, but it's like if you buy a Mac, you've got a Mac, and you've got to use the Mac operating system. With a PC, you've got options, you've got choices. Yet still, Microsoft has the lion's share of operating system installations. Right? Everybody's on Windows 10, but Linux has been around for a very, very long time. And why are we not switching to it? Why don't people switch over to Linux? It's a perfectly good operating system. And I think it's because there's a lot of reasons for that. Microsoft, primarily, I think, though, Microsoft just has, their interface is just fine. Like, they're competitive. If you compare the interface of Linux to the interface of Windows 10, they're pretty comparable. I don't see any significant advantage of one over the other. However, the software that you can install, the number of programs you can install on Windows and the quality of the products that you can install on Windows is very significantly better than what you can find in Linux. So the ecosystem itself is kind of breeding this monopoly of Windows. Even though I would say at this point, Windows is not doing anything to be anti-competitive. Right? There's nothing that Windows that I can tell, at least that I can see, that Windows is doing to be anti-competitive at this point. They just have a better product. Okay, I'm going to move on through the article. Google dominates online search in the U.S., accounting for about 80% of search queries. The suit marks a stunning reversal for Silicon Valley, which has largely avoided clashes with Washington, even as European regulators have levied huge fines against Google and others. European regulators have fined Google a total of $9 billion with a B. I remember talking about this before. $9 billion with a B for anti-competitive practices. In 2018, Donald Trump attacked the EU decisions. I told you so, the European Union just slapped a $5 billion fine on one of our great companies, Google, Trump tweeted. They truly have taken advantage of the US, but not for long. Since the mood has changed, now one of the things I do want to kind of point out here, just so you guys don't conflate the two things, this has absolutely nothing to do with, let's call it deplatforming or shadow banning or any of those type of practices or, conservative voice boycotting, whatever you guys want to call it. And there's a term that's escaping my mind right now for some reason. But yeah, all of that stuff, this has nothing to do with it. This has nothing to do with like what Facebook and Twitter did to the New York Post article or anything like that. This is just strictly in terms of the search engine and its advertising process and how it's not allowing, like how competitors are having a hard time getting in the industry because of the things that Google is doing. Okay, I was gonna say I've never heard of Pronto Mail, but Proton Mail. Okay. Survivalizer says Windows is not being anti-competitive, neither is Microsoft in general. Ever since they got rid of Balmer, it's been getting better and better. Totally agree. Way better. Satya Nadella has changed so much about Microsoft. I honestly, I keep saying this. Microsoft would have been best served if they had just changed their name. I know that it's Microsoft, big name, right? Logo, brand recognition, etc. They should have just completely relabeled themselves because they're not the same company. They are not the same company. They're based in the same place. They're housed in the same buildings. They're doing much of the same things in terms of, the products that they give you, but they don't. Their business practices are completely different. They've done a total 180. They're not Microsoft anymore. They're something else. They're Microsoft 2.0, I guess. I don't know. All right, since the mood has changed with Trump and other conservatives joining liberals, including Senator Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, in attacking the dominance of tech firms, including Amazon, Google, Facebook, and others. And I do think part of the reason why, just to go back, right, this is not about the cancel culture. That's the term I was thinking about. This is not about the cancel culture type of thing where, people are not allowed to post anymore and Google ignores them. That has nothing to do with this. Or YouTube blocking or taking down videos. This has nothing to do with any of that. However, I think because of those things, because of their kind of targeting, I think, let's be honest, I think more conservative outlets are being blocked by these tech industries, right? I think that's pretty clear that it's happening. Not to say that it's totally one directional, just primarily. That has kind of built up the ire against the tech industry by the conservative contingent of America, right? The people who are more conservative or libertarian leanings that are their voices are being stifled by these companies, that kind of builds up the anger, and then you could find that anger being lashed out at, being unleashed upon these companies in other ways, right? We're going to come after you for antitrust on your search practices because of what you were doing in stifling our voices over here, right? That's where you're going to get kind of this everybody together kind of kumbaya moment, if you will. Survivalizer says, 100% agree. Microsoft now owns 2 of my favorite game studios, my tech stack of choice.net, Teams, which is the best streaming software I've used, etc. Yeah, I agree. I use Zoom all the time, but I like Teams when I can use it. But the problem is not as many people are using it. And I think Zoom is becoming kind of the dominant there. Speaking of antitrust, right? Zoom is becoming the dominant platform for streaming video. There's plenty of alternatives, right? There's a ridiculous number of alternatives. But again, we're reaching that point where the word Zoom is reaching verb status. Okay, let's everybody Zoom together. Let's all, we're gonna go into a Zoom meeting. Let's Zoom. Right? It's becoming a verb, and when you reach that status, you start to reach this bubble where you might be a monopoly. Right? Same with TikTok. Zoom is not all secure and owned by China. Same with TikTok. Well, I don't fully agree with that, but that's okay. We're going to move on. So while Democrats have largely stuck to criticizing the scale of big tech's dominance, Republicans, including Trump, have accused the major tech companies of censoring conservative speech. There it is. Trump's Attorney General William Barr reportedly pushed for the Justice Department to file its suit against the company against the wishes of lawyers who wanted to take more time on the case. Okay. I mean, maybe that is it. Maybe it has something to do with the ousting of Trump potentially after the elections. Maybe he wants to get the ball rolling now before he gets unelected. Or it could be an election play, right? It could be, hey, look, we're going after the big tech giants. But yeah, today millions of Americans rely on the internet and online platforms for their daily lives. Competition in the industry is vitally important, which is why today's challenge against Google, the gatekeeper of the internet, for violating antitrust laws is a monumental case both for the Department of Justice and for the American people, said Barr. Okay, I'm not going to go through the rest of this. I want to get into the antitrust definition here for Investopedia, because I think that this stuff is important to know what they're going to be legally judged by. That's okay, man. That's fine. No big deal. I have not had enough coffee. I still have my coffee cup right here. It is Coffee with Steve, so it is mandatory. Mandatory! You must be drinking coffee while watching. That is the law. No, I don't. Okay, anyway, sorry. Totally off point. Let's go to antitrust. So this is the Investopedia article they have on just kind of antitrust. I go to Investopedia for a lot of like economic terminology and such. Maybe I should look up that, what was the other one? Counterparties? I should probably look that one up on Investopedia. But anyway, I find that they're pretty good about staying pretty neutral in terms. They're trying not to politicize things too much on the Investopedia. So I find that they're a pretty good source of truth when it comes to understanding terms and what's going on. So what is antitrust? Antitrust laws are regulations that monitor the distribution of economic power in business, making sure that healthy competition is allowed to flourish and economies can grow. Antitrust laws apply to nearly all industries and sectors, touching every level of business, including manufacturing, transportation, distribution, and marketing. Antitrust laws prohibit a number of business practices that restrain trade. Examples of illegal practices are price-fixing conspiracies, corporate mergers that are likely to cut back the competitive fervor of certain markets, and predatory acts designed to gain or hold on to monopoly power. And that one there is a little bit more vague, right? Predatory acts designed to gain or hold on to monopoly power. It's a little bit more of a vague terminology there, but that's probably the one that they're going after Google for, right? Some individuals like Christine Lagarde are known for having had focused legal practices on the subject. Understanding antitrust. Antitrust laws are the broad group of state and federal laws that are designed to make sure businesses are competing fairly. Supporters say antitrust laws are necessary for an open marketplace. Healthy competition among sellers gives consumers low prices, higher quality products and services, more choices, and greater innovation. Opponents to antitrust laws argue that allowing businesses to compete as they see fit would ultimately give consumers the best prices. And that's kind of your two opposite sides, right? One is saying we need more competition to work in the marketplace, and in order for that to happen, you need to have several different organizations within the same industry, right? That are all kind of competing for the same customers, and that's how you actually drive down prices, is by having competition. So that's the one argument. The other argument is saying allowing businesses to compete as they see fit would ultimately give customers the best prices. I don't understand that argument, honestly. We've seen throughout time that if you give businesses monopolies, they will charge more. All right, as they start to get a foothold, they can charge whatever they want, and that's where you actually get corporate entities that work together to kind of make prices go higher, right? So it can be not just one company, but sometimes you get a group of companies that all say, you know what, let's just all agree to charge more. The airline industry has been very close to doing this before, where they have airlines. You know, if you think about your airlines, who's setting the airline prices? They're all kind of about the same. Why is that? Why are they all kind of in the same general area of price-wise? Well, that's because they all kind of agree on how much they're all going to charge each other, or charge you. And any sort of competition means that they're all kind of losing. So there's a little bit of some, I wouldn't call it a conspiracy, but there's kind of this agreement between the airline industries, and they're kind of watching each other. You see this with gas stations all the time too. Like if you see two gas stations that are all, you find two gas stations that are like one across the street from the other, you'll find that the prices are almost identical, right? There's somebody, they might have a penny less or 2 pennies less, something like that. But they're both going to be about the same. And then if you go across town, you'll see a completely different price set, right? You can go to a Chevron, for example, in downtown and have a certain price, and then go to the outskirts and have a completely different price that might be 50 cents cheaper, 40 or 50 cents cheaper. Right? Like you could have that kind of swing in the same city with the same exact company, possibly even the same owners of those two gas stations. But because this area has these two gas stations competing against each other, they kind of have this agreement. Like, I might edge you a little bit by a penny here on this day, and then we go the other way. But it's kind of this agreed upon, we're gonna work kind of together to keep the prices inflated in this area. In downtown, we're gonna, like, this is a high traffic area, we're gonna raise the prices. And I will compete with you, but only marginally. I'm not gonna blow you out of the water by dropping it 40 cents, which I could do right now. I could drop the gas price 40 cents right now and be fine, and I could totally undercut you, but then we're both losing that way, right? I don't really want that. So you can have that kind of thing happen. Anyway, so we're going to move on. The trust in antitrust refers to a group of businesses that team up or form a monopoly in order to dictate pricing in a particular market. And that's what I'm talking about, right? Is the trusting, where you get, a group of businesses that agree to set the prices in a certain range. How antitrust laws were formed: the Sherman Act, the Federal Trade Commission Act, and the Clayton Act are the key laws that set the groundwork for antitrust regulation. Predating the Sherman Act, the Interstate Commerce Act was also beneficial in establishing antitrust regulations, although it was less influential than some of the others. Congress passed the Interstate Commerce Act in 1887, designed to deregulate the railroads. To deregulate the railroads. It said that the railroads must charge a fair fee to travelers and must post those fees publicly, among other requirements. It was the first example of antitrust law, but was less influential than the Sherman Act, passed in 1890. The Sherman Act outlawed contracts and conspiracies restraining trade and or monopolizing industries. For example, the Sherman Act says that the competing individuals... Okay, so here we go. For example, the Sherman Act says that competing individuals or businesses can't fix prices, divide markets, or attempt to rig bids. The Sherman Act laid out specific penalties and fines for violating the terms. Okay, so you can't price fix, which Google isn't price fixing. There's no price, it's free. Dividing markets, right? So that would be like, okay, I will take up the Eastern Seaboard. You can have the Midwest, and then Charlie can have the West Coast. Right? That would be kind of dividing markets. And we agree that we can set our own prices however we want, or we can do the business however we want in our region, and you just each have your own region. That's still a monopoly in a way, right? Even though you have companies that are separate, quote-unquote, competitors, because they have arranged to have their own regions that they manage, if you will, and have total monopolies over those regions, cable companies, that is essentially an antitrust, right? Or that is a trust that you're building between different organizations. Even though they're quote-unquote competitors, they're really not competing against anybody. Okay, and then attempt to rig bids. I'm not entirely sure what that would be. I can't think of an example or a concrete example of that, but that does seem about right. Like, okay, maybe somebody can drop a line in the live chat about what that means, attempt to rig bids. I think maybe price gouging on a bid or collectively overpricing them on a bid. Yeah, hardware stores. Oh my gosh, don't get me started on hardware stores. I'm looking for an electric outdoor heater. Nobody has them right now. It's wintertime. It's almost wintertime. It's fall. I want an outdoor heater. Nobody has them. Nobody. Everybody's indoor right now. But, like, it's still fall. I can still like to sit outside on my porch at night. Anyway, okay. Totally getting off subject. In 1914, Congress passed the Federal Trade Commission Act, banning unfair competition methods and deceptive acts or practices. There we go. So that's probably where we're getting a little bit closer, is banning unfair competition methods and deceptive acts or practices. Deceptive acts or practices. Are we deceiving you? Okay. Unfair competition methods. That's probably even a little bit more close to home on what we're talking about with Google. Survivalizer says, fire pit. Oh, Renee says fire pit, but I can't do a fire pit. I am renting, and it's an outdoor patio, so I can't have a fire within like 10 feet of the property, and the property line boundary is like there's no place to go away from the building. So I could probably like set up a fire pit in my little driveway, but that would be really kind of silly. But an electric heater should be perfectly fine. I don't think that that's a fire hazard. Anyway, Survivalizer says rigging bids would be like influencing contract prices with the government or other big bids. Amazon does that all the time. Yeah. Who was it that was really ticked off? Was it Google, I think, that wanted to sue Microsoft because they won some sort of government contract. I can't think of it off the top of my head. It seems like it was an aerospace military contract that Microsoft won, which was, yeah. Anyway, okay, moving on. Don't want to divert too much off of the topic here. The Clayton Act was also passed in 1914, addressing specific practices the Sherman Act does not ban. For example, the Clayton Act prohibits appointing the same person to make business decisions for competing corporations. That's interesting. So if I was a quote-unquote consultant for all of these large organizations and I basically set the rules for all of them based upon my consultation work, that would be anti-competitive. Interesting. Special considerations. The FTC enforces federal antitrust laws, focusing on segments of the economy where consumer spending is high, including healthcare, drugs, food, energy, technology, and anything related to digital communications. So it would be FTC. Factors that could spark an FTC investigation include pre-merger notification filings, certain consumer or business correspondence, congressional inquiries, or articles on consumer or economic subjects. If the FTC thinks that a law has been violated, the agency will try to stop the questionable practices or find a resolution to the anti-competition portion of, say, a proposed merger between two competitors. If no resolution is found, the FTC puts out an administrative complaint and sometimes an injunctive relief in federal court. The FTC may refer evidence of criminal antitrust violations to the Department of Justice for criminal sanctions. The DOJ has jurisdiction in telecommunications, banks, railroads, airlines. The FTC and DOJ also work with regulatory agencies to ensure certain mergers fit the public interest. Okay, so they're talking a lot about mergers there because that's a pretty common one. That's where I think most people actually think about antitrust laws and monopolies is what's been going on with, say, for example, T-Mobile and Sprint, right? T-Mobile taking Sprint. Now, I remember when AT&T took over Singular, and that was big news because, you know, those are two pretty large companies that were merging into one, and you kind of find that there are fewer phone companies out there now than there were before. You really only have like T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T. Those are really the only three big names in the U.S. markets. And this is U.S., by the way. I don't know. I don't pretend to know what the European or Asian markets are like, but that's pretty much what we have is just those three in America. And we used to have a few more than that, right? There still are some ones. I think U.S. Cellular is still a thing, but I haven't seen or heard much from them at all. There was another one before Verizon. Verizon bought out somebody else, and I can't remember who it was. But yeah, there used to be a lot of competition in the cell phone market, and now it's like smaller and smaller. And I think that's a good way of pointing out also. So even though there's limited competition between those organizations, those companies, and I think there's a lot of price gouging going on with cell phones. I think the amount that we pay in cell phone bills is absolutely ridiculous. But the technology that has emerged from cell phones with such little competitive practices, with so few competitive practices, is kind of interesting. It makes for an interesting case study. You have towers, right? Like cell phones don't just work because of something miraculous in the air. You have to set up these towers, and the different companies own the towers. So whoever owns the towers can say which businesses, which of these cell phone companies are allowed to set up their transmitters on those towers. And they're all operating on different frequencies. So all of your cell phones, they typically work on different frequencies that are owned by the different cell phone companies. I used to work for AT&T, so I know a little bit about this stuff. So you have different bands that the companies own that are being transmitted on for all of these towers. And whoever owns the tower can basically say, these are the companies and these are the frequencies that we're going to transmit on, and you can buy this tower. Now, sometimes it's the companies themselves. It's AT&T, it's T-Mobile, it's whoever that actually own the towers. That's actually quite often what happens. But you can actually, if you can actually own some property and petition like the city to set up a tower in your area. There's a bunch of legalese and red tape and stuff you got to do in order to do that. But you can actually individually own a tower and then sell your access to your tower. And you have to get like through FTC, Trade Commission, all good stuff like there. Not Trade Commission. The FTC. Anyway, you can set all this stuff up, but the bottom line is like there's some competition here between the three major marketplaces. There's three major players in the marketplace, but there are physical barriers to the reach of them, right? There are actual physical barriers that they own much of, but also you could individually own some of the things and then sell those things off to them, or sell or rent out the space, if you will, or lease it. So there's a lot of still kind of competition in a way there that prevents them from just having a total monopoly on things and saying, we own this tower. So you can have a tower that has all three of the major companies that are broadcasting off of it, right? And that's actually quite common, is that you have major you have all of the major bands being sent out on one single tower in the area. So that's why the maps that you see, if you look at like an AT&T map and a T-Mobile map and a Verizon map, there's going to be a ton of overlap on we provide service here, because they're all basically using the same towers in those areas. They're not separate towers. They're the same tower operating on their own frequencies. So, it's an interesting case study. If you ever want to take a look at it, that's a really good place to go. But that's probably one of the reasons why they're not as... the government doesn't typically look at cell phone companies as much for antitrust as I think they probably should, because I think they're doing a lot of price gouging and rigging, right? Okay. So I kind of want to... I think that's probably good for the antitrust. If anybody has any questions about antitrust, Investopedia has got really good terminology stuff. What is a monopoly here? Antitrust, forced technology transfer. I don't know what that is. Forced technology transfer. Anyway, I'm going to move off of that because who knows? We don't need to know that. Okay, going back to News Voice here. I think I'm going to stay away from the left and right, but I think I am going to kind of wrap it up here in what I'm talking about in terms of just check out News Voice. This is there's an app that you can get for your phone called News Voice. You can also check them out on their website, newsvoice.com. I really recommend them because they they typically it's more community sourced. So I can, if I want to set up an article, I can actually go and actually post that I found this article, give a title and a summary, and then find all of the relevant links from all the different news organizations and post them as part of my posting here about this content. And that gives you a good variety of sources for you to read through and see the left and the right and the Asian and the European and wherever else, to kind of get a different perspective on whatever that subject is. And it's completely sourced by people, right? I think they do have some editors. They have some people that are on News Voice that are posting these things up, but you yourself can create an account on News Voice and you can post your own topics with the articles that are pointing to that topic, and then they get rated. So you get these little up arrows that kind of indicate, I can say, okay, I upvote this particular subject so that it'll appear higher up in the News Voice page. Let's see. Renee says, I'm split on having HOV involved on making decisions regarding monopolies and such. So I think he meant G-O-V, not H-O-V, but I agree. So this is kind of, and this is what I was actually wanting to talk about a little bit today. What is, like, we know what antitrust means, businesses that are doing, maybe working together in order to stifle competition. And sometimes it can be a conglomerate. It can be like multiple corporations that are working together to do this, or it could just be one. But is this really meeting that? I have to ask, is what Google is doing, and can you think of what Google is doing that would be anti-competitive versus are they just providing a better product? Are they just providing a superior product and we've become so accustomed to using that product that it's hard to get away from it? A good example of this would be Facebook or Twitter, right? Or let's just take Facebook, for example. My friends and family are all on Facebook. And no matter how many times I tell them, hey, there's other platforms. There's other places you can go. There's MeWe, there's Parler, right? There's there's Minds, there's like a ridiculous number of them. But nobody's using them. Heck, you can go to MySpace still. Nobody's using them. Why? Why? Is it because Facebook is doing something to prevent you from opening your browser and going to those sites? Is Facebook not allowing you to install those applications on your phone? No. It's just that's where everybody's decided that they're going to go. So how do you say that Facebook is doing anything that is illegal in terms of the product that they're providing and preventing others and preventing competition? Now, set aside, again, the privacy concerns, right? The privacy concerns are definitely something to be concerned with. And I believe wholeheartly that we should have some, that I think there even is a lawsuit. There was a lawsuit filed against Facebook for that, for your private information. Yeah, I like MeWe more than Facebook from a feature set. Yeah, I agree. I can react with an eye roll emoji. Exactly. There's a lot more emojis you can do with MeWe. I like MeWe as a platform. I'm a little tired of their 30-day trial that I keep having to skip every time I open the app, but still, I like MeWe. Parler is not bad, but you can definitely tell it's all one-sided, right? It's like all of the people that are fed up with the left-wing group that basically owns and runs Twitter. Those people that are fed up with that are over on Parler, and it's just like almost the exact same thing, but the other way. So there's alternatives, but until we have an agreement that everybody wants to go to these alternative platforms, we're not going to get away from them. We're not going to get away from Facebook so long as all my friends are there. As long as all my friends and my family are there, where else am I supposed to go? I keep telling them, hey, I'm over on MeWe, I'm over on Parler, I'm over on Minds, I'm over on etc., all these different places, and they never come over. So I'm kind of forced to go to Facebook, not because of any sort of Facebook practice. It's just that's where everybody's kind of agreed upon going. And it's weird because like MySpace was the same way for a long time. I still to this day don't understand how people went from MySpace to Facebook. I don't know exactly how that conversion happened. You had basically the exact same thing. The only difference was MySpace allowed you to customize your pages. That was basically it. That was the only real significant difference between MySpace and Facebook. Was that MySpace, you could go and you could build your own page, essentially. Your own web page. You could have your own look and style and background and pictures and all sorts of good stuff. You had your own kind of page. Facebook is like everybody is uniform. Everybody's following exactly the same format. And we're going to decide how the content appears to you. And everybody was like, oh yeah, that's cool. I love being told what to do. That's kind of what happened. And I think it started out, it was exclusive, right? Facebook was only for colleges for a while. And maybe some of it was that exclusivity hype. If you were in college, you could go to this Facebook thing. And then, then it kind of spread around all these different college campuses. And then finally one day they were like, okay, we're going to let everybody in. And everybody just flooded Facebook. And all of a sudden that's where we were all at. I still to this day don't understand. It was just it was like a marketing genius to have exclusivity and then open it up. and all of a sudden everybody wanted it. But it was nothing. It's not better. Like, that's the thing. It's not actually better. It's just that's where everybody's gone, and so that's where you have to go. Is it a monopoly? You could say that it's a monopoly. Like, is a monopoly always a bad thing? I think it typically is, but how do you legally say that they're doing something wrong if all they're doing is providing a product that everybody flocks to? And it has nothing to do with any sort of business practice that they're doing. What is the business practice Facebook is doing that is keeping people on their platform? Survivalizer says, regarding loving being told what to do, you should have overheard the conversation I did yesterday with some older ladies at the antique store. Quote, people used to just do what they were told, etc. Yeah. People, yeah, in the old days, you just did what your elders told you to do. Respect your elders. This is great. This has been a great engagement, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. It is about an hour long I've been on, so I do have to kind of shut it down here. I got some work to do. I got people to help and stuff, so I am going to have to end it here. But if you guys did not get notified about this being aired, and you want to get notifications that I'm doing these things, because again, my schedule is so wacky, I never know when I'm going to be able to do one of these Coffee with Steves. So please make sure you are subscribing and clicking on the bell notification icon to get notified that I'm going live. I try to give you guys about 15 minutes warning ahead of time at least when I know I'm going to do one of these. So make sure you're clicking on that bell so you get notifications, and since I can't keep a tight schedule. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining me today. I hope you guys did enjoy it, and we will be seeing you guys later.